All right, in this video I'm going to talk about sanding, sanding your project, because you know what? At a certain point when you start building your projects, at a certain point you're going to want to start screwing it together. And this project, it's not quite there. She has to do a little bit more, but you know, she might jump ahead and just start screwing the thing together, which would be a shame, because like here's a bunch of pencil marks, and you know, the wood has some defects. It has to be sanded. Because if she just went ahead and screwed this together, then you can't really get in there after the fact and sand it. So that's what I'm going to show you. I'm going to talk about sanding, and you know, we have some power sanders that you already know about, but I'm going to show you what can be done by hand first. And just as a little warm up here, the sandpaper we have in the cupboard over there, it comes in different grits. And when I say it comes in different grits, I mean some sandpaper is rougher than others. So let's start with the roughest stuff, which is, I've got some 80 here. Actually, here's a really rough piece. What's this? 36, oh my God. This is 36 grit, this is actually from a floor sander. It's very, very rough, okay? And just ask me before you want to use something like that, because you don't want to, this will ruin a nice project if you're not careful with it. But 36 is a low number for sandpaper. And then moving on up, you know, you're going to have an 80 grit. 80 grit is good to start with if you want to remove, you know, some deep scratches and stuff like that. But then sandpaper you're going to be using a lot of is 120. So you see the 120 there. And also you're going to finish off, this is the smoothest I want you to get with, is a 220. Okay? So start low and move high. Generally, for most of the wood in here on your projects, you're probably best off to start with a 120 and finish with a 220, unless your wood is kind of rough and you're trying to get rid of certain marks and stuff, in which case you'll go with an 80. Don't use this though. You see this? This is a 400. So don't use this on wood that you're just sanding in preparation to put the project together. The reason we have this in the shop, it's part of the finishing process when you're brushing urethane on a project, and you actually use this in between your brush coats of urethane. So I'm going to set that aside. Next, let's take a piece of wood here, okay? So I want to sand this piece of wood. What are my options? The first option, I guess you could use power. So here we have this is called a third sheet sander, and there's a separate video where I show you how to cut the sandpaper and install it on this thing. It's a very short one, but this is a very simple tool to use. You know, you just turn it on, and you're just going to be sanding in the face of your project, and that's it. Don't overdo it. Just get rid of whatever you're trying to get rid of. I don't suggest that you use this for edges like this, okay? And the reason is because you can very easily throw your corners at a square, and so I don't recommend that. Just for faces, you know what? Do the edges by hand. Another way to sand, you know, if the sanders are busy, or there's nothing wrong with taking this block of wood. I have a bunch of these in the shop. It has an SB on it that stands for sanding block. And get a piece of sandpaper. So I'm going to take a piece of 120 here, and I'm going to divide this 120 into 4 pieces. Okay, and the way you do that is just fold the thing up and find a sharp edge somewhere, and just go along that sharp edge like this, and do the same in the other direction. So like that, and just find an edge on a vise, the edge of the table saw, the edge of the bandsaw, whatever. And you're just sort of scoring that. And that's it. And now, this will come apart for you like that. Okay? Like that. Now you have yourself a quarter sheet. Okay? And a quarter sheet will fit around these sanding blocks like this, and you're ready to go. So, with sanding, you always sand in the same direction as the grain. So the grain runs up and down like this. Okay, so you're going to sand up and down like this. And, you know, put your back into it, and also be even about it. Don't stick in one spot. Move it around. Okay, like that. And keep going. The problem if you sand across the grain, if you sand it opposite to the grain, you're going to see those marks. Okay? But listen, when you've got all the marks out, or when you think you have, then find a nice little bit of sunlight. Like look at this, I have a nice little bit of sunlight here, and I can tilt it sideways in the sun, and I can cast shadows across the surface. You can also walk over to the overhead door in the shop and cast the daylight across here, and if you play around with this like this in the light, you're going to see all the defects. So keep sanding until those are gone, all right? And then take your 220 and repeat. Do the same thing with the 220. And then it's basically done. And for edges, so here's some edges here. You can go at the edges like this. You can also put this in a vise. And with a curved surface like this, you can, first of all, go to the disc sander, the power disc sander, and you're going to get that as nice as possible. So she's done a nice job on this curve here. But the sandpaper on the disc sander is an 80 grit, and we want to go smoother. So at this point, you know, you would take your 120, and you would go like this. Okay? Pressing in with your thumbs, and getting rid of any bumps. Now, if this is a really damaged surface, okay, if it's really damaged and there's a lot of bandsaw marks and stuff, then come to me and we'll get you a piece of like a 36 grit or something, and you can do the same thing, and it will very quickly get rid of those bad marks and make it nice and smooth. Okay, but you would do on this piece here, I would do a 120 and then a 220, and then it's ready to go. And when that's ready to go, that's when you're going to start thinking about screwing it together. But show it to me first, and I'll give you some pointers. Okay, what else have I got here? I've got these sanding pads here. So what I've done here is I've taken some sheets of floor sanding material. So this is from a floor sander at Home Depot. And I've just glued them down here, and I've written the grit on the back. So that's a 50 grit. What this is nice for is you can put this in a vise like this, and so instead of using a sanding block back and forth like this, if you have small pieces, okay, this is a little bit too big for this, but if you have smaller pieces, or if you have a square frame, like 4 pieces of wood that are joined together, and if you need to level the corners, then you can go around like that on here. But if you do have small project parts like this, then you can sand them. You can sand them like that. You can round the corner a bit if you like, the edges, whatever you like. I've got a 50 grit here, which is quite rough. Okay, so it's going to leave this in not such a great shape. So I would only use the 50 grit if you're trying to remove a lot of material, or if you're trying to level the thing, like if it's a square frame of 4 pieces of wood joined together, and you have to do a lot of sanding on it. But I've also got an 80 grit here. Okay, so those are open to you. And what else? I think that's about it. So you've got the third sheet sander, you've got the sanding block, and you've also got the power sanders in the room, the disc belt sander at your disposal. But I just wanted to show you how to get going here with hand sanding. Okay, thanks very much.